aspirational hero. Move that aspirational, 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 move that aspirational goal. So the aspirational heroes need to be there. They need to be pure 100% from the beginning. They need to be at that unobtainable goal of perfection and good and hopeful and inspirational and all of that. Move that aspirational, 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 move that aspirational. Stop deconstructing heroes. Aspirational or cathartic motivational. Move that aspirational, move that aspirational, move that aspirational, move that aspirational, move that to aspire. Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another office hour stream. Hopefully everything's coming through okay here. Tom Spiegel. Yeah, you guys always like that video. Always like that that introduction. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Let's see who all we have in here. The chat's been going for a while. I know I believe Eldridge Fan was first. Then of course we had Ghost Planet Max Inc. Popping in with the Wall O text. Glad you're actively engaged, my friend. Nathaniel Zalozball, welcome, welcome. Who was it that said, saw a message earlier. Big Al Presents, welcome, welcome. Crystal Ashes, good to see you there. Stunning and Brave Megatron, yeah, Stunning and Brave Megatron. Kind of hate you right now, not gonna lie. Said I hate to brag, but I met 3 Supermen at a convention today. Tim Daly, George Newbern, and Brandon Routh. Easily the best right after Christopher Reeves. No argument here, my friend. That's a crazy awesome roster. Man, I'd love to do that. I also love to meet Dean Cain. And I mean, of course, he's passed, but George Reeves, we can't go without giving him. And you know, of course, Kirk Allen and Bud Collyer and all those greats, you know, that came before. But man, those are 3 awesome ones. George Newbern, Tim Daly, and the great Brandon Routh. Man, I'd love to do that. That'd be awesome. Very jealous of you. Let's see. Crystal Ashes flexing the membership. Can't be here. Had too many glasses of rum. Set this one out. Catch the replay. Well, you enjoy yourself. Hope you don't wake up with a headache there, Crystal Ashes. But catch you when you come by. Let's see. Eldridge Fan popping in with a super chat. Said, heard a great definition of a demon. Paraphrase Tim Powers. Something that saw the face of God but never will again. But you might, so it hates you. That's a pretty good definition there. It kind of it brings to mind, that's a great definition. It reminds me though of you know, before I converted to Catholicism, I was at a lot of churches, in particular Calvary Chapel, that's a very much a Bible only church. We go by the Bible only. The Bible is our authority, and that's it. No man, no church, it's the Bible. And it's a really sexy idea to somebody, especially in America, where you're, you know, like, don't nobody tell me what to do. God talks directly to me, and that's it. All I need is this Bible he gave me, and that's it. But that kind of viewpoint taken to the extreme is kind of ridiculous. And it was so ridiculous that at the church I left, the pastor will actually tell you, we don't know what angels are. We don't know what demons are. We don't know if they're fallen angels. The Bible doesn't technically tell us that. So we don't know if they're fallen angels or not. So we don't know because the Bible doesn't explicitly tell. I'm like, the Bible doesn't explicitly tell me that vegetables are good for me either, but I'm going to go ahead and go with that. You know? I mean, it's kind of falls into some silliness, but that's just a little aside that brought to mind. Ace Moic, good to see you there. Who else am I missing here? Stephen M, great to see you. Final Fantasy, Electric Barbarella. Electric Barbarella, I owe you an email about some of your chapters. I need to remember to get that to you. Another super chat here from Eldridge Fan. Before we even get going, it says, the man who robs his life of meaning will instead find comfort in identity. That's a good quote. I heard that from one of my author friends. might be original to him. Yeah, I've never heard that before, but that's dead on. That describes an ideologue to a T. It their identity is their meaning. And you see that in the leftist ideology today, right? They've got to have a victimhood. Their life is devoid of meaning if you take away the fact that they're an LGBTQ plus 1, 2, 3 XYZ, or a this or that, racist minority, or a racial minority, or whatever. Anyway, it's an interesting saying there. Leah plus size, welcome, welcome. Got another super chat down here somewhere. Tom Spiegel, my dear sound engraver, welcome, welcome. Michael Skimbody, thank you very much for the super chat. Time to talk about some Batman. Bro, why do the animated series and the new Batman adventures capture Batman so much better than Nolan and Reeves? I need some closure. Also, did you like Del Toro's Hellboy films? Loved the first Del Toro Hellboy film. Love it. It's one of my favorite Superman hero films ever. Superhero films ever. Sorry, Del Toro's original Hellboy. I know it's not exactly what the comics were and everything, but I don't care. It's just a wonderful, wonderful movie. Part 2 is not a bad movie, but part 2 in my mind was on its way to something else. Like it's kind of an incomplete part of the story. Like it was clearly the way it ends and everything. It was clearly a first part of a two-parter, and he never got to make the second part. So I don't really like to watch part 2, to be honest with you. I also don't like the way it just sort of just casts aside the main character, the young, I forget his name, but the young guy who's being brought on to take care of Big Red after his father's passes away. I don't like the way they just sort of unceremoniously cast him aside, because he was a big part of the first movie. But yeah, that first movie was great. I mean, why are the animated series better? Because they came from a time in which people weren't allowed just to do their own versions of the character. Ever since Nolan came in at a time after the George Clooney bat nipples had just completely, utterly tanked the idea of superhero movies for a while. Then superhero movies started to come back with the Marvel stuff, some of the Spider-Man movies and so forth, the X-Men. And so they're like, well, let's see what else can we do with Batman? And they were just willing to do anything with Batman other than Clooney and bat nipples. And they let Nolan, who's very much an auteur, he does his own thing and he's not going to be bound by anything else. He did his own takes on Batman. And that's just the trap that Warner Brothers fell into. They're willing to let anybody do whatever version they want to of a character now. And it's pretty crappy. So, yeah, that's why we got to where we are. But good question. Imaginative Hobbyist. Man, Super Chats just roll right in before I even start. Happy birthday. Happy Batman Day, Prof. Yeah, Batman Day. Favorite Batman-like character. My favorite Batman-like character? Do you mean so not a character from Batman's mythos, but a Batman-like, like a vigilante-like character? I don't know much of my favorite. I love the character of the Shadow, the old pulp character of the Shadow when he's written well. He's not always written well in some of the new comics that they've done, but he's a great character. That there was a big inspiration for Batman too. Him and the Spider and some of those pulp heroes. Yeah, off the top of my head, I'd say yeah, Batman. No, not my birthday. Not my birthday. It was earlier in the month. Man popping in. Hello, sir. Good to see you there. Said, yeah, but do we really know vegetables are good for us? As soon as I said that, I thought, oh man, but then the people who do the red meat diets or whatever, the carnivore diets, which I don't have a axe to grind one way or the other on that. But yeah, as soon as I said that example, I was like, some people would actually even argue if vegetables are good for you or whatever. Yeah, good one. Another one from Michael Skimbody. You guys you guys have stuff to talk about, and we're gonna start now. Prop, would you say Paul Dini's detective comic run from 2006 was the last genuinely great Batman stories? Beats Morrison's run. Definitely beats Morrison's run. Why do you think people love his run so much? Paul Dini, I don't know why people just flock over Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison, as I've said before, he's a really great idea man. Some of his ideas are awesome. Look at All-Star Superman. Really great ideas for the character of Superman. He's not a very good storyteller. He's just not. There are some wonderful scenes in All-Star Superman, I'll read All-Star Superman any day because it really is trying to depict a good, iconic Superman. But you look at the story, like the pacing of the narrative, the way the scenes go together, and the character development, and it's just somebody throwing out ideas against the wall. And in Grant Morrison's case, he's capable of coming up with some really great ideas, and I think that's why people. But I think he jumped the shark big time with Batman. I don't like him, the whole Damian Wayne thing, which I think Damian Wayne was probably supposed to be sort of a temporary thing. I think I've heard people say that he was thinking that, but yeah, I do think Grant Morrison is overrated, and I don't mean that in a way like he's crap and he's useless. I like, some of the things that Grant Morrison comes up with, but I just don't think he's the best writer out there. I don't think he's very good at actually stringing a plot together and pacing it very well. And some of his ideas are crap, like these Wonder Woman ideas. uh, but yeah, Dini's just talk about somebody who understands the character immensely. That's Paul Dini, definitely. Let's see. I think I got everybody here. All this. Oh no, one more super chat. Said happy 100th to the Phantom of the Opera. Yes, yeah, Big Al. Good to see you too, there, fan man. I think he was in there correcting the real Batman Day, the day that the original Detective Comics came out there too. If I scroll past that comment there, but yeah, yeah, Big Al I think did a rewatch or something of Phantom of the Opera. The three of us were supposed to rewatch the original Phantom of the Opera, the original Lon Chaney Senior Phantom of the Opera, but we need to get a date that Big Al and Fan Man and I can all get together and watch a movie again. Our schedules are crazy now that we're teaching again and stuff. So before I go any farther, though, I do want to say this, and I'll probably cut this out. Maybe it's a short. Doug Brody reminded me, and of course, Doug Brody, I talk about him a lot on my channel because I loved his books. Now I've reviewed every single book that he put out, the Shelley and the Shelley Murder in Mind, that duology so far, which is amazing. The Ship trilogy, that horror sci-fi trilogy, talked about that. He was on my channel. I'll link to the interview he did. Really great interview. Just a great talented guy. He's somebody who's had his had a presence in the industry for so long, doing storyboard art and prop designs for stuff like the original Thor movie, Van Helsing, all these kind of cool things back in the day. And even to this day, he's still working in the field, but he's also writing, and he's written some great stuff. Anyway, if you, for whatever reason, if you're near LA or you're around there, if you're going to the LA Comic Con next weekend, he's going to be on the main floor, the Alien Sky publishing table. That's his publishing imprint that he publishes books through. So definitely go check him out. If you saw the interview, he's a great guy, really fun to talk to, and you can pick up a good autograph there from him. So yeah, if you or anybody is going to the LA Comic Con, main floor, Alien Sky publishing table, hit up Doug Brody. All right. Think I've got everybody there. Ghost Planet Maxine talking about the Hammer Phantom of the Opera. Yeah, I've never seen that. I've never seen the Hammer version, but I have it now. I've been we're going to talk about some Hammer horror today a little bit. We're going to finally break into it. But I've been doing a lot of Hammer horror viewing this year, and it's fun. It's really great fun. And I've been getting there. A lot of them are available on compilation DVDs, and you have to make sure that they're in a good set and everything like that. But really excited about watching that one because that one came as a compilation set when I was trying to get some other movies. So yeah. Michael Schimbati, thank you very much, sir. I'll go ahead and get this before I jump into my topic here. Said, don't like Dark Knight. It's the sole reason Joker can't be a wacky, murderous clown anymore. How he has to be a champion or a rebellion against society. It's also why he never got Hellboy 3. Do you agree? Also, why we never got Hellboy 3. Do you agree? You think the Dark Knight is why we never got Hellboy 3? I don't know. I've never heard that. I'm not sure. I've never heard that argument there. But yeah, I mean, when Dark Knight first came out, I'll give him his props as a movie. If you ignore that it's a Batman story, as a movie, it is a really cool exploration of what does justice mean, because you have some really great themes in there. You've got the DA Harvey Dent trying to bring justice legally to Gotham City in a city that's corrupt politically, and you got Batman, a illegal vigilante for all intents and purposes, but trying to support. Let's get the corruption out of the city so we can have a Harvey Dent and we could do this legally, and I wouldn't have to exist, right? And then on the opposite of that, you got Joker showing up as the just complete and total anarchy. I don't even believe in your right and wrong, which in all of these are forces in society. So if you ignore the fact that it's supposed to be a Batman movie, it's a well-made film, and I think that's why everybody's like all fawning over it and rubbing their nipples over it every time it comes up. But it's not a very good Batman movie. No, it's just not. So I agree. Yes, we're going to talk about all these great characters, actors and their characters: Peter Cushing, Ingrid Pitt, Christopher Lee. Yeah, it's good stuff. Before we get to that, though, I did tease on a Facebook a YouTube announcement that I gave the Quarry a chance. It's a video game, the Quarry. I don't know how I found it. I think I was just looking for some creepy Hollywood Halloween type video games to play, and this was a more recent game. When was this released? The Quarry was released somewhat recently, within the last like 5 years or so. Was it? Let's look it up here. I got its IMDb page up, but of course I can't find the one little piece of information I want when I want it. I don't know. I don't see it. It's been released. It's within the last 5 years, I think, even. So yeah. Now I lost the page I was gonna reference. Okay, there we go. I think I found it. Yeah, like on a video talking about um some recommended creepy games or whatever, because I like Halloween viewing, I like Halloween reading, I like Halloween gameplay this time of year. I'm replaying through again Arkham Knight, for all my issues with the story. It's just still a fun gameplay through, and I'm almost to the end of that. But I'd played the Quarry. Now I was really wary of the Quarry. I was like, I don't, man, it's a modern game, and it's a very much heavy story game. Now the trailer immediately hooked my interest because it's tapping, and even the game design, like the title screen and stuff, and the loading screen and everything is very reminiscent of like old 80s horror, like the Friday the 13th, those kind of movies where you've got the camp counselors out there and they're, in the middle of a horror film, basically. That was cool. I like the context. You don't really get what the horror is yet. You don't really know what the real threat is. That's kind of a mystery as you're playing through the game. I like that. It's called an interactive drama or an interactive narrative more than it is a video game, because there are you sit there and watch the chapters and you sit there and watch the story progress, and every now and then you got to be on your toes with the controller because it might want you to hit this button or move this joystick that way or something like that, because that ends up determining something that happens or doesn't happen in the game. And then occasionally it'll give the character over to yourself when you're supposed to go search for clues or go look for some things and do some things, and you never know who's going to jump out at you if you go the wrong way here or there. And but it's more watching than it is actual gameplay, so they call it an interactive drama or something like that. It really reminds me of the old choose your own adventure games. And this is the same company that did Until Dawn, I think, which was 2016, which everybody's just like, did you watch it? What about Until Dawn? What about Until? No, stop it. I'm talking about the Quarry right now. No, I haven't played Until Dawn. I know you're very excited about Until Dawn. I know you really want to tell me to play Until Dawn, but we're talking about the Quarry right now. I might try to Until Dawn. I don't know. I had such a good experience with the Quarry, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But I looked up other games that they had done, and you can really see a heavy DEI imprint on this company's games. And I don't know for sure how much of that is definitely in the game, like you can't avoid it, or how much of that it just depends on the choices that you make. Because the whole Sweet Baby Inc. and all this nonsense DEI infiltration into video games, one of the big things they've tried to do is make sure you sit through this. You have to sit there and watch this indoctrination, like the whole Spider-Man 2, which I refuse to play, but apparently there's a whole scene where when you play as Miles, you have to help this gay character ask their gay boyfriend or gay girlfriend, I forget which relation was, but you have to help them ask their gay other out to a prom or whatever, and the game makes you sit there and watch them, and it's nothing skippable. You have to play as Mary Jane, and you have to do that's part of their DEI BS. and I hate that. I absolutely hate that. It kind of even hurts my replayability of the first Spider-Man movie, to be honest, or game. And I love the first Spider-Man game for its Spider-Man gameplay. It's amazing. But when you have to play as Mary Jane, who's an insufferable biatch in the game, not even the real Mary Jane in any way from the comics, and then you have to play as Miles for a little bit, I hate that. Um, these games, a lot of the games this company made have come from that. In fact, there's one, I forget the title, but deals with H. Holmes that I thought was really fascinating. He's that American serial killer from the 1800s, and I find that era fascinating and that topic fascinating. So that normally would have been something like, oh, I'm really going to give that game a chance. But I saw some of the trailers for it, and it's just drenched in DEI. It's ugly. It's disgusting. Um, so I don't know how the Quarry got away with it being so good. Maybe some of these games, like I said, maybe it just depends on the choices you make. I don't know, but it's anyway. So it is what it is. Until Dawn, I don't know. I know Until Dawn deals with the Wendigo myth, which I think is fascinating. Again, that's something that I really like to delve into, but I don't know how much of that's in Until Dawn. It was made in 2016, which is kind of the beginning of the era, so maybe it wasn't too infiltrated or too mucked up by that nonsense yet. But I might try that. The Quarry, though, like I said, great setting. And so I thought, well, that's really interesting. That's cool. I like the idea of this sort of choose your own adventure kind of, gameplay or experience. I love my choose your own adventure books from when I was a kid. I remember reading all of my Batman choose your own adventure books and stuff. I love that kind of thing. And the cast is really quite amazing. Some of the characters I definitely know, and then other characters, it's actors you see because they're motion capture. It's kind of like LA Noir or something like that. They motion capture. These are the likenesses of the actors and their voices. Um, Ted Raimi, Sam Raimi's brother, he's great in many things I've seen him in. He was great. He's great as a sheriff. Grace Zabriskie, I've seen in a ton of things. Kind of almost a character actress, but she does a lot of different things. She's great in the game. You recognize her face. Halston Sage, she was in the Orville. She was the alien race who's like the super strength. Um, Brenda Song, she was in the old Disney Channel, like the Zack and Cody or whatever. I think she's married to Macaulay Culkin now too. I definitely recognize her. Ariel Winter, of course, from Modern Family, and from uh, she does the voice for Sophia the First, the princess that my daughter likes to watch on Disney. Um, David Arquette, of course, the great David Arquette from Scream. He's in there. Ethan Suplee, if I'm saying his name right, Suplee or Suplee, but I'll always know and love him as Randy from My Name Is Earl. But of course, he was in you remember the Titans too from back in the day. He's been and done stuff. He's in it. But here was the kicker. Here was the selling point for me. All of this, I was like, still kind of like, do I really want to give that a chance? It's a modern game. It's probably going to piss me off at some point. Then I saw Lance Henriksen. Lance Henriksen is Jedediah Hackett. Sold. Gonna give it a chance. Can't say no to Lance Henriksen. If he's in it, I've got to give it a chance. That's just he's never let me down. Even in something that I didn't like with him in it, like the Alien 3, he came out and denounced that movie too. So he's in it. I was like, definitely got to give this a chance. And it's creepy. It's atmospheric. Oh man, it's so atmospheric. A lot of times video games, I'll have to, unless it's my first playthrough of a game, I really do try and listen to the music, listen to everything. But if I'm playing a game, especially if I've been playing it a while and I'm just trying to fulfill a quest, I'll have like a YouTube video going on in the background or have it on mute and have some music or something if I've just played it ad nauseum. But this is a game that I can't imagine ever doing that with, because I'm going to replay it because you can get different endings depending on your choices. I am going to replay it a few times, and I'm going to replay it one more time this year, actually, before Halloween. But it's so engrossing. I mean, it sucks you in. It's like watching a movie in a theater with people who actually shut up around you. It's that good. It's storytelling wise, really engrosses you in. Atmospheric. You're on the edge of your seat. Like I said, each gameplay can be a little different depending on the choices you make. Depending on the choices you make, different people will die, different people won't die. You'll get a different outcome in the end. It's just really cool. I recommend this game if you like a good choose your own adventure kind of game. Apparently, you can choose in the settings too on the title screen if you just want more of a movie kind of experience. It'll pause every now and then and ask you a question. Do you want to say this or this? Do you want to go that way or that way? But I like to play the more interactive where you kind of have to be on your toes to hit the button at the right time and stuff like that. I like kind of being more part of it. But I think you can choose not to do that as well. But you're these camp counselors. It's the last day of camp. at the end of the summer, the students, you've just said bye to the students, and you're all these teenage counselors are left there, and there's this sense of urgency that the counselors have to clear out of there, especially by sundown. You guys have to get out of here. You have to get out of here. And you start seeing these like hillbillies in the hills with guns and like blood all over their face, like watching you through binoculars, and you're like, oh gosh, this is freaky. And the counselor's like, get out of here, guys, get out of here. And one, douchebag of a character is mad that this girl broke up with him, so he sabotages the van that was going to take you out of there because he's like, "What? One more night here, and I'll convince her otherwise." And then the head guy's like freaking out. He's like, "Oh my gosh, are you guys stay inside? Do not go outside, no matter what. Promise me you'll go inside and lock the door." And he's going to go get some parts for the car or something like that, or do something. He'll be back in the morning to help him get out. Of course, they're stupid teenagers, and they're like, "Stay inside. Let's go outside and party." So hence all of the horror ensues. Now, at this point, I really do recommend you check this game out. I'm going to say a spoiler right now, though. If you at all want to play this game, please, please, please hit me on mute there for like the next 5 minutes or something. Do not listen to what I'm going to say now. If this game sounds like something you might actually want to play, it's to the extent like, remember with Knights of the Old Republic. If you played Knights of the Old Republic and if you don't know anything about Knights of the Old Republic and you're just playing it through the first time straight, the big reveal that comes in that game, that's how heavy this reveal is in the Quarry that I'm going to tell you right now. So I'll count down to 1. Make sure you've muted it if you don't want to hear a spoiler. If you really want to enjoy a first initial gameplay through this, please do. It's a wonderful game. But I'll be talking about this for probably the next minute or two. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, here comes spoilers. I thought the game was really terrifying because you got these hillbillies there. And that's way more scary to me than anything else. I love my archetypal monsters. Love a good scary movie with archetypal monsters, but human beings that do things to people, that's far more terrifying to me. And I don't even like it so much. So these hillbillies that are like watching the counselors with their guns and binoculars and blood, and I'm thinking this is going to be like a Deliverance meets Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing, and I'm like, man, this is going to be really freaky. It's not that. It ends up being a traditional werewolf story, which I freaking love. Freaking love it. But for me, it does really crank down the terror of the gameplay. But at the same time, it wraps up the interest in the game thematically, because I love that kind of thing. The hillbillies aren't there. They're looking for the werewolf, not necessarily you as a camp counselor. So it's I love the entry into it in a good. It's just a good archetypal werewolf story. It's a wonderful werewolf story, and that's part of the mystery that you don't really know until like halfway through the game, at least maybe a little later. But it was a lot of fun for me finding out that mystery as I went along. It's got all these really cool elements. The werewolf story's tied into this old carnival show that came through there, and it kind of like crashed in the woods or whatever. There was a fire, but you've got this main character, which I guess is kind of like a setup for the way a lot of this company's games work. But she's like this old soothsayer, of the carnival, and she's kind of guiding you through in between the chapters. You come back and see her and give her all the little extras that you found or whatever, and she gives you hints about the next chapter and so forth. That's really cool. I did my first playthrough. I played through successfully to where only one counselor died, and he was the counselor that annoyed me most anyway, Jacob, the douchebag who sabotages the van so they can't leave in the first place. Can't stand his character. So he died, and that didn't make me cry. I did kill the werewolf at the end of the first gameplay. Next time around, I won't kill the werewolf, because the werewolf also has sort of a tragic aspect to the story too, but then he's still a dangerous werewolf. So you can get all these different kinds of endings. Okay, I'm done with the spoilers. I'm done with the spoilers now. I'll say this. This is my only critique of the game. My only critique of the game is that, and I've only played it through once, and I've only had one playthrough, making choices that led to these people dying and these people not, and so forth. The ending of the game, the denouement, is really kind of a letdown, because this is such a well-developed story. You are just sucked into it. You're living this story with these characters as you're playing through it. And by the end, okay, it's a solid end to the story. It's not like it just leaves you hanging and like whatever happened. Like, it's a solid end to the night, a solid end to the story. But then you just get sort of a denouement, like as the credits are rolling, it just sort of shows the pictures of these characters. This is what happened to this one. This is what happened to this one. This is what it's like. give me at least a scene or two. Give me a proper. Come on, this thing has been such a well developed story. You know, you should have filmed a few good denouement scenes and just played the appropriate one to whatever the players' choices were. So I like that. I didn't like that. I didn't feel like it was a great denouement. But my caveat is this: I've only played through on one ending. So maybe, and I do know that if you play through different endings, different things happen at the end. So maybe you get more of a satisfying denouement or a satisfying end to the story if you play with making different choices or something. I don't know, but I did like that. Or I didn't like that. I wish it would have been more of a denouement. But I'm going to play it through a couple times more and see if I can get different endings and see what they're like. Um, I'm kind of the player too that I'm not going to play through to every ending. I don't want to make sure a bunch of people die. That's not fun for me. You know, I'm not the kind of person who played through Red Dead Redemption or Knights of the Old Republic or all these games where you can kind of go light side or dark side. Mass Effect. I don't like playing the dark side ones, the low honor or the dark side. That's not fun for me. So anyway, I do recommend the Quarry if you haven't played it. You can unmute now. Unmute, Nathaniel. Okay. Unmute. Yes, you can unmute now. I'm done with the spoilers, but I recommend the game. It's pretty sweet. And let me know what you think of it when you play the game. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on it. June Teku the Enigma for $2 says, "What are your thoughts on the '90s Lois and Clark series?" I love the '90s and Lois and Clark series. Really liked it. It had its specific tone that it was going for. Um, of course, I'd much prefer if Dean Cain had a proper spit curl, but I love Dean Cain as Clark and as Superman. Love Terry Hatcher as Lois. That show has my favorite Perry White ever. I can never remember his name. Somebody else to tell me, and I'm like, that's right, I knew that. It's a girl's name. I forget his first name. But that actor's name anyway. He's the best Perry White I've ever seen in a movie. He's better than Jackie Cooper, better than he's my favorite Perry White ever. So I like that. And there's some really cool takes on some villains. I mean, come on, George Jefferson is the Toy Man. You can't beat that. A lot of good stuff in it. So yeah, I like that. It was good. All right. When I talk about Hammer horror now, I'm only going to get to tonight anyway. I'm only going to get to the Frankenstein, the Curse of Frankenstein, and the Horror of Dracula. So those first two movies of the Hammer horror field, that were Peter Cushing as Dr. Frankenstein, of course, Christopher Lee as the monster, and then Christopher Lee as Dracula and Peter Cushing as the iconic Van Helsing. But before I talk about those two, I did leave off with the Universal Monsters Meet Abbott and Costello movies and how the iconic Universal monsters in popular culture were starting to be, deconstructed a little, not deconstructed in the way we think of deconstruction today. We think of deconstruction today like the horrible things that Zack Snyder has done to the DC characters or Disney has done to Star Wars. Not that kind of deconstruction. I mean that the iconic monsters started to become a little bit more for children. They started to become a little bit more for kids. And that's why you got the more of in a comedy genre like the Abbott and Costello films. But they were still iconic. And even in those movies, as I've said in my review of it, they weren't silly and dancing around and like playing jokes on each other. They were still the scary monsters. They were just in a setting where Abbott and Costello were doing all the comedy around them. But there were some movies that were made in between that era and the late 50s Hammer horror when they really made these characters dangerous again, And some of these movies, I'm just going to cover two of them very briefly because you can find this we're getting to the point in the era where it's impossible to go cover every single Dracula movie or every single Frankenstein or Wolfman movie ever made at this point. It's really starting to, everybody's popping up and making their little movies. But there was two I would recommend. One I would kind of recommend. It's not a very good movie. It's a low budget. It's called Frankenstein's Daughter, or Daughter of Frankenstein. I forget how that was worded. It's a very low budget movie. It's kind of silly. Like the monster, the person making the monster makeup didn't know that the monster is supposed to be a female. So the monster makeup is clearly a dude. It's like this big grizzled nose, and and the story kind of tries to calibrate it a little bit, making it like, okay, what's a woman's brain in the creature's body? And but so much of the story it's built on. It's called The Daughter of Frankenstein. It's not a great movie, but I do really like a couple of the angles that it has on the Frankenstein mythos. It takes a cue from the Universal movies, where we got like, this is the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein at this point. It's in the 50s in the United States, so it's kind of bringing the ancient monsters into a modern setting. Um, and I like the playing with the idea of the monstrous feminine. It's a really, I think you could do. They could probably do a remake of this movie and rewrite it, and obviously remake it into a way that would be pretty freaking interesting. But one of the things about the monsters is they always want a different brain in the creature, so that it can be more pliable, so that it can be not damaged, not a psycho's brain, or more submissive to its master's instructions, like in the Abbott and Costello and so forth. And in this one, the guy, the Dr. Frankenstein's grandson, wants to use a woman's brain because she would be more submissive, which is kind of ironic, because the woman's brain that he chooses is this little tease that's been like leading him on, but then not letting him get anywhere with her, and he chooses her brain. It's like, she'll be more submissive. I was like, well, she wasn't all that submissive to you in life, in a first body. But it's a fascinating. There's a lot of room for some cool exploration there. The movie doesn't necessarily do it all on its own, and it's not a great movie, but it opens some cool doors that you can kind of think about. So that's fun. Frankenstein's Daughter, or Daughter of Frankenstein, however you say that. The other one that I'm going to talk about is, I think it's actually a pretty darn good movie for what it is, for its budget, for its setting and everything, and that's The Return of Dracula. Return of Dracula, again, this is a 50s movie. It's the same kind of idea, where you get these old iconic monsters and you're bringing them to a modern, or contemporary at that time anyway, United States setting. And the idea is that Dracula comes from the old world to this little town in California. And this is all in the very beginning, so I'm not spoiling anything for you. There's a German man who's a painter, and he's been unable to really paint. He's constantly censored. And this is like in 58. I think this movie came out in 58, the same year that Hammer Horror would release Horror of Dracula, actually. If I got that right. But it's so he's coming from Germany, and he's unable to paint because of censorship. So you imagine it's probably some Cold War stuff, some Soviet stuff or whatever, or he probably I'm sure he lived through the Nazis there as well. But anyway, he's coming to America to a leg of his family that had immigrated to America a long time ago. So they're fully American over here at this point. They have American accents. They're fully Americanized, this leg of the family, but he's coming to join them, to live with them, so he can be more free and paint and so forth. Well, Dracula kills this guy on the train and takes his place. So you have Dracula, and the guy playing Dracula too is really quite good. I appreciated the fact that he wasn't just trying to do a Bela Lugosi impression. At the same time, he was far more attached to that scary other foreigner archetype than, say, Christopher Lee's was, in the same year that came out. We'll talk about that in a second. But it was a great depiction of Dracula. I like that, The Return of Dracula. And he comes over, and of course he's got his eyes set on the young daughter of the family, because he's going to build his brides anywhere he goes. He's Dracula. I like the aspect of the theme of what modern progress has left behind will always come back to haunt us. That's kind of seminal in a lot of this iconic horror. The old world traditions, or the old world, the things we've left behind in our new, progressed, evolved, modern way of life. It's still there. It's still there in our psyches. It's still there for us to deal with culturally and so forth. And, the monster coming from the old world to this family that is, modernized themselves into America, is a cool exploration of that. There's even a cave, like an old abandoned mine cave, that kind of plays into this idea as well, thematically. So I did like that a lot. I like the fact that it's still very much the Dracula who's afraid of crucifixes and so forth. That's this character. He's still the supernatural Dracula. This is not something you get in the Hammer movies. This is still a supernatural Dracula. They do this cool thing whenever you see him in the coffin. They have like fog or mist just like rolling around his head or his body, or whatever the shot incorporates of his body in the coffin. And then you see the mist kind of pour out of the coffin, and then you see him standing there. So it's him as he did in Dracula's in the Bram Stoker novel, turning himself into mist and so forth. But that was a cool visual that was very easy to do back then. They didn't have to do like an animated bat thing or anything. You could just draw him in and out of the coffin like that. So I like that aspects. I definitely recommend Return of Dracula. It's pretty decent. Um, so like I said, there were a lot more movies made in that kind of transitional time period, but just wanted to cover those highlights because really the next big step in the evolution is the Hammer horror. And Hammer, they were originally they wanted the rights from Universal to do Frankenstein. That was the first one they did, the Curse of Frankenstein, as it was called in America's released there. But they couldn't get the rights from Universal, so they could because originally they were going to have Boris Karloff play an elderly Dr. Frankenstein, like an old Dr. Frankenstein who tries to come back to his work or something like that. Would have been pretty cool, Boris Karloff coming back as anything, but they couldn't get the rights, something like that. They did strike a deal with Universal because they had the rights to the Frankenstein story. That's public domain. They could do any kind of Frankenstein movie they wanted to. They just couldn't use the makeup, the creature design, any of the specific designs from the first Universal movies they couldn't use. So they had to do their own thing, which ended up being something pretty interesting. And then they couldn't, they did strike a deal with Universal that Universal could distribute the movie in the United States. So Hammer made it, but Universal would distribute it in the United States. The unique thing about the real interesting, though, there's a lot of cool changes that Hammer's Frankenstein made to the character. But the unique thing is that Baron Frankenstein becomes the monster. I don't mean literally the creature. He's not literally the Frankenstein's creature in this movie, but he's the monstrous one. He is the evil one. In all of the Frankenstein iterations up until that point, he's certainly to be blamed for being myopic, misguided, playing God, all these kinds of things, abandoning his creation, all these kinds of things. But it's the monster itself, the creature, who isn't evil per se. He's just sort of a toddler with super strength, and he's abandoned. He's never given any kind of emotional support and development, so of course he's going to cause trouble. And but in this movie, in Peter Cushing's Frankenstein, Hammer Horror's Frankenstein, the Baron Dr. Frankenstein himself is just evil. He's a complete and total sociopath. He is fixated on his work and his experiments, and everybody else just exists for his amusement or to help him along in that. That's it. He brings this tutor in, and they seem to have a good working relationship. So you kind of get the Professor Waldman like relationship between him and Frankenstein, the conscience of the older doctor, the teacher, student kind of thing, trying to caution him against this. You get that dynamic, this character named Paul in this context. But Dr. Frankenstein is just straight evil. I mean, Justine is the housekeeper in this. She's not, there's no family of, the Frankensteins in this one. She's the housekeeper who he just toys with. He sleeps with her constantly, toys with her affection, keeps promising he's going to marry her, doesn't, and thinks it's funny that she would think he was even serious about such a thing because she's so far beneath him. So how could he ever really want to marry her? He kills people straight out just to get their brain for his experiments. He kills people left and right. I mean, the doctor is the evil one, and it's an interesting exploration because that's not always been the case. Of course, in the Universal movies, because they were made in the 40s, they really had to try to redeem Victor or Henry Frankenstein, as they called him in those, as much as they could. And as much as I love the original Universal, those are my favorites. I'll take those over Hammer Horror any day if you really made me pick one or the other. It makes far more sense story wise to go ahead and make Dr. Frankenstein the baddie. He's not sociopathic evil in the novel, but he's truly to blame. I mean, he's the monstrous one playing God, bringing this creation to the world and just abandoning him. The monster himself, even though in the book he gains more intelligence, he taps into more intelligence and learns, he's still emotionally a toddler. He doesn't know how to handle his emotions. He's been abandoned in the world. And so there's that great anger, in him, or a great desire for love. And if the love can't be satisfied, the anger will be appeased, that kind of idea. So this was a cool function. There's also the concept. Okay, well, how do they do the monster? And Christopher Lee, you can't redo what Boris Karloff did so 100% perfectly. And Christopher Lee knew that because they had done that in Universal. Glenn Strange did a very admirable job, and even Lon Chaney before him. Not so much Bela Lugosi before him, but trying to emulate what Boris Karloff did. But Christopher Lee, I was reading up and kind of studying and doing some looking at interviews and behind the scene documentaries and some history about the Hammer horror stuff. And Christopher Lee said he wanted to really play him as though he was moving with different parts of bodies that didn't know each other. So he's really moving like he's trying to move this leg, which doesn't know it's connected to that part of another body and another leg. And he really does look like that. He really truly looks a lot more like a corpse sewn together with different bits, like one dead eye at one point. And I like his portrayal of the creature. It really looks more like a zombie. And you do feel some empathy or some sympathy for the creature in terms of just the story's nature. The story, he's just this thing created and he's kept chained and doesn't know what he is or anything. But the creature never talks. The creature is just more of a mad dog on a chain in this movie. Really, again, the story is about Dr. Frankenstein in the Hammer horror. And I've got some critiques as we get into the later Frankensteins that they made. And we'll talk about those next week as I talk about further on in the Hammer horror. But the reason they went this route with Dr. Frankenstein and Hammer horror's Curse of Frankenstein is that Hammer had been making these movies about a character called Quatermass. In the 50s, they were a time when we left, in terms of cultural monster movies, we left the more iconic monsters behind to an extent. And it was more about the big sci-fi monsters, the alien invasions, or the big, giant Gila monster, or, the incredible shrinking, this or that, or the incredible growing, gigantic man or whatever. It was more of like a science fiction type of monster films or thriller sci-fis. And Quatermass was a character. It was big in Britain, and they released some of the movies in the US too, and they put them under different titles. But Quatermass was a doctor, a scientist of the atomic age. And in all of these movies, one of the kind of tropes is that there's this big threat, an alien threat, or some kind of radioactive threat or whatever, and the government has to bring scientists in. And quite often there was like a scientist who would sort of be the swashbuckling hero or something like that. It's one of the tropes of those types of movies. And Quatermass was one of these. He was a doctor, a scientist that would always be brought in to consult on this or that threat, and he would help, overcome the threat in the end. But he was a stereotypical kind of like cold, the science is all that matters kind of person. He was a good guy. He was the hero. He's the one that you followed who actually, took care of things in the end or saved you in the end. But he wasn't, an iconic Superman, an aspirational Flash Gordon, or somebody that you felt safe with. He was a cold, calculating, cerebral. All this matters is the science, that kind of character. And they took that idea from the movies they had already made and just ramped that up, big time to make their Dr. Frankenstein and Curse of Frankenstein. And that's where they got it from. And, as I said, kudos to Christopher Lee for playing the creature. Now, I don't think he ever wanted to play the creature again. He didn't want to be known for the creature, right? Because this was before Dracula was even made. They did Curse of Frankenstein first. So I don't know if it was him that demanded that the creature be, but they destroy the creature in a way at the end where it ain't coming back, So the Dr. Frankenstein becomes the hero, not the hero, the anti-hero, the villain, he becomes the character that you follow through the sequels in Hammer horror. There's multiple different creatures depending on the movie, different types of creatures, different types of aspects of going about it, approaching it, and so forth. But the doctor is the evil one. He's the one that you're following. He's the monster. And I like that aspect. I think that's pretty interesting. My critiques of some of the sequels are in that they kind of shy away from that at some places, which I think kind of hurts the movies. But we'll talk about that next week. It is interesting too, before I get to Dracula, horror Dracula, that I don't know how true this is, but in some of the interviews, Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee have said that the people at Universal, because remember, Universal, they had the deal where they were going to distribute it in the United States. And they said Curse of Frankenstein was such a big hit that they said that kind of helped them off the brink of bankruptcy again. And if you've been following my journey through these movies, that's like the third time in a row that the Universal monsters have saved the company from bankruptcy. Because as soon as Dracula and Frankenstein came out, they saved the company from bankruptcy. As soon as they came out with the Abbott Costello, they saved the company from bankruptcy. And now as soon as Hammer Horror does versions of them, apparently they're saving the company from bankruptcy, So I don't know all the logistics or all the specifics of that, but it's an interesting, the monsters are are lucrative. They're a lucrative character. Tell these stories. They're great stuff when you do it truly iconically. So the next year they did do the horror of Dracula. I think it was just called Dracula in Britain, but it was the horror of Dracula in the US. And now we had Christopher Lee in one of his most iconic roles ever as the Count Dracula, and Peter Cushing in one of his most iconic roles. I'd say people probably know him better. Well, I don't know. I can't speak for the time period back then, but I certainly run into more people who know him better as Van Halen. Van Halen. That'd be awesome. Van Halen fights Dracula. Van Helsing, know him better as Van Helsing than they do him as Frankenstein, because he's just such an iconic Van Helsing. Peter Cushing makes Van Helsing like a Robin Hood or a swashbuckling hero. He's a very physical Van Helsing. Long before Hugh Jackman in that movie ever tried to do anything like that, Peter Cushing was dashing over tabletops and ripping down curtains, and that iconic in the end where he grabs the two candlesticks and makes a cross out of them, and he's like, almost fencing with Dracula but holding up a cross. Peter Cushing is an amazing Van Helsing, really great, and he continues in a lot of those movies after that as Van Helsing as well. Christopher Lee's a fantastic Dracula. What I liked about this, again, Horror of Dracula, they didn't try to copy Universal, because you can't copy Universal. Those classic Universal movies, you can't ever touch them again. They're so wonderful. Even for all their flaws, they just tapped into such a pure magic, and it'd be folly for anybody to try to redo that. So Hammer knew that, whether it was because of their budget constraints or the rights or whatever, they tried a different track. And it'd be a really great paper for like one of my students if they ever wanted to do this, if I ever taught like a monster class again or ghost story class again, to juxtapose the first reveal scene of Dracula in the 1930 Universal or 1931 or whatever it was, Universal, with Bela Lugosi, that really great shot where he's standing on the stairs and he's got his cape open, and Carl Freund's camera sort of zooms into him. Really great shot. Juxtapose that with your Dracula reveal shot in Horror of Dracula, where Jonathan Harker's just walked into the castle and he looks up, and you've got Dracula, Christopher Lee's Dracula, on the top of the steps. So again, same stairway scene, but Dracula walks down the steps, and he walks in a way in such that his carriage, his posture remains still while his feet are, so he's not floating, but it's a very powerful character coming at you. You realize that. And he's, got that deep voice, Mr. Harker, and he's whoosh, just kind of comes right at you, I am Dracula. You are welcome here, so that's great. They made the conscious decision in these movies, and I don't know why. I think it might have been so they didn't have to worry about a lot of special effects, but they made a conscious decision in the Hammer vampire movies to not do so much of the supernatural stuff like shape-shifting into bats and wolves and mist and all of that. He's still a vampire. He's still mortally afraid of crucifixes. Sunlight kills him. Garlic still works. All of that. It's still the vampire. Has to stay in a coffin by day. His bite will infect you with vampirism if he, wants to turn you and so forth, but not kill you or whatever. So it's still all the vampire trappings, but they took away the bat and the wolf and a lot of things from the novel. What they did add, though, of course, the Horror of Dracula, the Hammer horror movies are, I think, the first Dracula movies we ever see with actual fangs and actual bites, fangs going into the flesh and so forth, which is a big part of the story from the novel. It's a big part of the phallic, undertones of the story. We didn't see those in the Universal. You would see Bela Lugosi with that sinister face kind of go to a woman's neck, but then that was, it's cut from there. You don't actually see fangs. And likewise, you'd see like Mina, do the same thing to Jonathan, and when she's affected or whatever. So part of it is just it's in Technicolor. They actually used red blood. It's the first time you actually saw red blood. In fact, the iconic opening scene of Horror of Dracula is the tomb of Dracula, or the coffin there with the word Dracula on it, and it's playing the music, the theme, and towards the end of the theme, the splatter of red blood hits the name, which you can see as red paint. But it's the first day, it's in the 50s. It's 20 years or so after they made the first ones in Universal. They're able to do a lot more censor wise and technology wise, and it's in Technicolor too. So it's really cool, and I love the vampire movies, the Hammer vampire movies. I've got less problems with those, the ones that came after that, than I did with some of the Frankenstein ones. But like I said, we'll talk about those to come more next week. But the you really did see The sex appeal of the character ramps up. Now, some of it's too because it's a movie in the 50s versus watching a movie that was made in the 30s. Because there's a lot of sex appeal in Dracula in the 30s movie too, if you understand the culture and the time it was made and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, Dracula, the way he takes these women and goes into their neck and stuff, but this just ramps it up. This and it's nothing like it's not nudity, it's no soft core like some of the Hammer horror films later is like, okay, that's a lot of boobs, But these were the ones that first made in the late 50s there, so it's none of that. It's just all in the story and in the acting. Like when man, when Christopher Lee is Dracula, when he goes after Mina or Lucy, I forget which one, but you both all of them, any woman he's coming after, she's infected or she's enamored with him, so she's opening the window and she's laying on the bed, and it's just very much like a woman eagerly awaiting her lover, and she's exposing her neck, and I mean it's you got that theme, and then he shows up, and the way he like grabs her head, and then there's this look on his face, and the way he has the fangs, and he dives into it's just much more that kind of underlying eroticism, that's in the story anyway. You really see it a little bit more palpable in these movies compared to what had come before. Obviously, they took that crazy links, in movies that came later. But this was the first time anybody was seeing anything like that. So it's no wonder that kids were going to see these movies because they knew these monsters from the Universal monsters that had become very safe for kids. And they were going to see these movies with their parents, who probably knew these, characters too. And all of a sudden, this is like ramped up big time. For the late 50s, this was some seriously scary stuff. And it's no wonder that these movies just made such a huge impact on audiences and on the characters' portrayals to come, after that. I mean, it's a big deal. And we're definitely going to talk about the rest of Hammer horror movies. One thing I don't have time to talk about tonight that we'll probably open with next week is their take on the Jekyll / Wolfman. The first one they did was Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll, which is really fascinating. Christopher Lee's in that too. It does a great job. We're going to talk about that next week, but then of course they ended up doing Curse of the Werewolf, which I've mentioned before, but we're really going to delve into that a bit too, because it's to my knowledge, the only adaptation that we've ever seen of Werewolf of Paris by what's his name? I've talked about him a lot though, but I did a whole review of the novel, so we'll talk about those a lot next week in the Jekyll and Hyde Wolfman attempts and pushes to mold that character as well. We'll keep looking at that, but they're mainly known for, of course, the Frankenstein and Dracula, and rightly so. These movies are just wonderful. I first watched Dracula and Frankenstein with Fan Man actually, and Al. It was our my virtual bachelor party before Sound Engraver and I got married. Since Fan Man was coming to be the best man, and Big Al dearly wanted him to be there. I wanted them both to be the best man, but Big Al couldn't make it, because of his medical issues and stuff like that. So we did a virtual bachelor party beforehand, and that's all I wanted. Me, I'm not I don't go out and party. I'm not into that kind of stuff. Just give me some headphones and my friends on on the internet, and we just watched the movies together over that, and we had a blast. And but since then, I've watched both of these movies 3 or 4 times. And Sound Engraver, we're only coming up on our 2nd wedding anniversary next month, so it hasn't been all that long. But I just, for whatever reason, I never really got into the Hammer horror films from a younger age. Not because I didn't like them or didn't want to. I don't know. They just didn't. I got into Universals and then all the stuff that came after, and that was just a little missing spot in my horror education, of these iconic monsters. But man, I fell in love with them big time, and have just watched them a lot of times since then. They did wonderful versions of The Mummy. Can't leave those out. And of course, they did a lot of great films that weren't necessarily the iconic monsters, but were great films. They did The Gorgon, The Devil Rides Out, a lot of those kinds of horror films as well, but just didn't deal with any of the iconic, monster movies. So those are my thoughts on Hammer. Again, we're only scratching the surface because I just wanted to talk about the big boom, the impact the first films made. We're going to talk more about them as we look at the evolutions of the characters in the films as they went after what the characters and what the movies kind of continuously seeped into the mythos and to the icons before they were over and before more people started taking on the characters and so forth. But it's a big important era, so I wanted to at least break into it tonight, and then we'll get to further incarnations of it in the Hammer universe next week. But good stuff. And it ends with a big bang too, like with Dracula AD and all that kind of stuff. Good, a lot of great movies to come. Even a lot of good super Frankenstein movies to come. Even though I've got some issues with some of the sequels and some critiques, I don't think they're all crap. And there were some really good ones to come too. David Prowse ended up playing the creature at some point, as the Hammer horrors cycle continued, and he played it in two movies actually. The great David Prowse, Darth Vader, Superman's trainer. All right, let me see if I've missed anything there because I have been talking and talking and talking. I'm at my hour mark, so I'm pretty frazzled out, but just definitely had fun talking about all these. I don't think I missed any super chats. Last one was from June Teku the Enigma. Yeah, about the Lois and Clark. I really should start rewatching the Lois and Clark. I'll probably do that in the new year. Right now, I'm in the Halloween season. I love doing the monster movies and all the kind of fun stuff I'm doing now. Usually between between Halloween, the Christmas era season, there I start to get into some Christmas stuff, but I can usually it's just that's a Tolkien era for me. For some reason, fall after like post Halloween fall is like a Tolkien esque fantasy, kind of place for me. I don't know, it's weird, but yeah, definitely going to get to the to rewatching Lois and Clark. Maybe I'll do that after the new year. But we got a wonderful Halloween, our holiday season in general ahead of us with Halloween coming up and Thanksgiving, Christmas. I'm psyched about this year. So been waiting for it, as I always do every year, for a long time. Um, Leah Plus says, I love that Lee gave Dracula some sex appeal, not just evil, ugly monster. A vampire is a sensual creature. It's a good point, and there was sex appeal to be had in Lugosi's character as well. This dapper man, this dapper foreigner in a tuxedo coming into these young women's uh, bedrooms, but that was very much a sex appeal of the 30s. It didn't translate anymore by the time you're in your late 50s, and to us in 2025 we can see it a lot better in Hammers than we could in Bela Lugosi's. But part of it too is that Dracula wasn't a foreigner anymore in in the Hammer films. He's just an Englishman, at least in the way he speaks, is the way he talks. Van Helsing himself is just an Englishman. You know, we don't have this foreign aspect to the characters anymore. From like the old world Europe. That's something about both Frankenstein and Dracula that was a part of their books, part of their mythos. Certainly, when they started being translated into Hollywood, that's part of the mystery of them. And Hammer horror just decided, we're not going to worry about that. And so it something's lost, but something's gained too. As you said, you get that. A lot of different aspects of the characters that come through. So I think that's part of what helps Peter Cushing do the more swashbuckling thing, because he's not worrying about doing a foreign accent to him or playing it a different way or whatever. And I think that's part of what gives Dracula more of the translatable sex appeal to like modern audiences, that as well. All right. That is my time for tonight then. I think I'm done. But yeah, the Mummy was great, Ghost Planet. I agree with you. Lee is the Mummy. He was a great mummy. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's a good deal. Oh, well, that was fun. I had a blast talking about that. Thank you guys for hanging out and chatting with it. I also want to say a couple things here. I'm getting back now to my short story publications. I've got a few different short stories that are ready to go, and I've got some of the cover art ready done for it. So I'm going to try and put one out by the end of this month, and then one out in October as well. So um, I'll put the link to those short reads, and just more of these short reads that I put out on Amazon Kindle store, which you can read even if you don't have a Kindle. But when I'm putting those out again now, I took a break in the summer because it's a good deal of money to get all those together and get them ready and get it published. And summer months tend to be lean for me. That, and then the other thing, what's the other thing I was going to say? Oh, my Aughtnauts channel, the Aughtnauts. Let me see if I can find this here. The link for the video. I still been going on. So it was actually Cassette Hiss was the old name of the channel that I was asking you guys to follow for me. This was the channel I started so that I could talk about some I liked. Uh, Stop there. Let me go back to this. Let me stop talking and doing the same thing at once here so I can okay. All right. I'm gonna give you the link here in the chat to the latest video. So the Cassette Hiss was the channel that I made up so I could talk about music. And then once I started playing music again and picking up the bass again, and really I've been writing some songs and everything, and I got together with some different musicians and whatnot. I changed the name of the channel from Cassette Hiss to the Outnauts. That's the name of this band that I've got project that I've got going forward. So that's the I could really use your support if you don't mind subscribing to the channel. I'm putting the link in the chat to my latest video. My latest video on there is me talking about why I'm just not that into grunge. You know, why grunge didn't really do it for me. Good. Soundagraver put the link to the Outnauts channel in general there too. But yeah, I talked about some bass stuff in some previous videos. My latest video is talking about why grunge just never really did it for me. But yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of cool rock stuff and eventually get you into hearing some music, some bass playing and some of the music that we've got cooked up and everything. So the Outnauts is coming. It's a project. It's coming. It's becoming a thing. But I'm trying to grow the channel even while I'm working on the project as well, so that, you know, by the time I've actually got deliverables from the project, I've got a platform, you know. So you would do me a big favor if you would go over there and subscribe to that. But if you haven't already, I appreciate those of you who have already. It's been my yeah, I talk about, yeah, my boss hates grunge too. I wouldn't say I hate grunge. And I'm also very careful in the video to say, what do I mean by that? I don't mean that I hate every band that somebody might call grunge. I don't mean that I think, you know, everything by Nirvana sucks and everything by this, that. So I've got a very specific kind of angle that I'm going at it with. And I think I describe or express myself pretty well. Hopefully you'll see what I mean. But a lot of people so far have got what I meant. Like, I kind of get what you're saying. I agree with you there. I like plenty of bands and songs that other people might call grunge. Like I said, I really like Sponge. I love Collective Soul. Uh, but yeah, I talk about my first experiences with like Nirvana and Soul Asylum and Pearl Jam and like, what is this? I mean, I'm a rocker, you know. um, Soundgarden, even though they had some great songs, and I love a lot of their songs, I can't really throw a Soundgarden album on and just groove to every track. I will say this though, Chris Cornell, one of the greatest rock and roll singers ever. Period. That man was amazing. God rest his soul. Both with Soundgarden and Audio Slave, he did some stuff with Alice Cooper. Man, Chris Cornell could just, man, he can sing anybody into the ground. He had a whale of a voice. It was awesome. So I agree. Pearl Jam is incredibly overrated. You talking about Kiss releasing a grunge. You know, a lot of hair metal bands released albums. It's funny. It's a really unique time period. Maybe we'll talk about that on the Outnuts channel. That might be the next topic of mine. It was a unique time period because you had previously hair metal bands. Once they realized, okay, hair metal culture is not really a thing anymore, most of them released some really good, solid rock albums. It just kicked. And that's what you saw with Kiss with Revenge. But then you'd also see some of them try their hand at the new sound or the new grungy kind of sound. And you saw that, you know, Kiss did a little bit of that. Warrant eventually did a little bit of that and stuff. And that doesn't always go over the same way. Some of it's successful, some of it's not. But yeah, that's probably a good topic for another Outnuts video. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. If you would subscribe to that channel. Otherwise, I'll be back next week to this one with some more. We'll keep going with the Hammer Horror stuff and see how far we get until Halloween. And hopefully you guys are having a good spooky season so far. If you live in anywhere near the mid to southern hemisphere of the United States like we are, it's still freaking summer temperatures out there. Go away, summer. Nobody likes you. Didn't like you the whole 3 months you were here. Go away. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the true blue monster stories this time that you love. Thanks for watching.